Keyboard switches explained. Linear versus tactile versus clicky. What's a keyboard switch? To put it simply, it's a mechanical button that is underneath each key of a mechanical keyboard. The switch is what delivers the electric signal to the circuit keyboard and to your computer. It has three key features: response, how fast the switch can deliver the signal and be recognized by the computer; the sound; the travel times, how far the key is going to travel when you push it. Depending on the switch, there will be noticeable tactile feedback as well as audio feedback. How do keyboard switches work? There are several different types based on the way it performs and how it's constructed. However, all mechanical switches involve three parts: the housing, the spring, and the stem. When you press the key of a keyboard, you'll also be pressing down the key switch system. This in turn will put downward force on the spring until the stem can reach the button. This process conducts an electrical signal to the printed circuit keyboard, the PCB. The electric signal will be sent to the PC or laptop, telling it that you've pressed a certain key. This process happens in just a fraction of a millisecond. What are the different types of switches? Linear versus tactile versus clicky. So each type of keyboard switches will offer its own unique features and advantages over the other types. Thus, you should choose the right type of keyboard switch depending on your needs and preference. In general, there are three types of mechanical keyboard switches. First, let's start with the linear switch. It's the simplest of the three types, and when pressed, the switch moves straight down and it springs back up without any tactile feedback, often referred to as a bump, and no auditory feedback, the clicking noise. Without this feedback, the linear switch produces a smoother keystroke, allowing faster actuation. That's why linear switches are preferred by gamers who are looking for speed above anything else. For the tactile switch, as the name suggests, the main characteristic of this switch is the tactile feedback we feel when a key is actuated. It's the bump. Tactile switches are designed to produce a noticeable tactile feel in the middle of travel, and the purpose is to let you know that your keystroke has been registered properly. However, you won't get any auditory feedback with this type. This type is ideal for typing since you'll get an indication of a proper keystroke without having to bottom out the keys. It's also great for those who don't want a noisy keyboard. Clicky switch. You can think of a clicky switch as a tactile switch plus the clicks, and it's characterized by a distinct click sound of the older traditional keyboards in the 80s and 90s. There are two reasons for preferring a clicky switch. You love the clicky sound, or you want more indication of a keystroke with both tactile and auditory feedback. Which switch is the loudest? The loudest is the clicky switch due to the auditory feedback. If you're looking for the loudest mechanical keyboard switch, I suggest you check out the Cherry MX Blue. Which switch is the quietest? Both linear and tactile switches are sufficiently quiet, especially when compared to a clicky switch. The tactile feedback of the tactile switch can produce a small sound, but it can be reduced with the use of O-rings. If you want a tactile bump but less sound than a Cherry MX Blue, then get the Cherry MX Brown. We can say that the most linear switches are quieter since they're not designed to produce any feedback, and a good linear switch can produce zero noise. If you want a nice linear key with minimal sound, I recommend the Cherry MX Red. Choosing the right keyboard switch. These are the factors to consider: environment, feedback preference, and keyboard purpose. First is the environment. This is where you'll be using your keyboard. Clicky switches with their high-pitched and loud auditory feedback can obviously disturb other people around you. In this case, a linear or tactile switch is the better choice. But if you're going to use the keyboard alone, or if noise doesn't matter, like if you're going to use it with your gamer friends or esports team, or most of them will wear headphones anyway, then you can go for the clicky switch. Number 2 factor is feedback preference. Feedback is generated by the keyboard presses. If you want tactile feedback, the slight bump with every keystroke, then a tactile or clicky switch is the way to go. If you prefer a smooth feeling, then you're going to need speed more than tactile feedback, then choose a linear switch. Number 3 is keyboard purpose. There are 2 different purposes of a keyboard, typing and gaming. If the keyboard is mainly used for gaming, you should go for linear switches with low response time and low travel time. They can offer smoothness and consistency with every key press that can significantly help a rapid gameplay. On the other hand, if it's for typing, clicky switches are generally the best choice available for its tactile and auditory feedback. But if you can't use a noisy keyboard due to reasons discussed, then go for the tactile switch. If you're going to use the keyboard both for gaming and general typing, you should probably go for the tactile switch that can provide tactile feedback without sacrificing too much of response and travel times. Which key switch is best for a heavy typist? The answer is different since different typists have different preferences, and it all goes down to each switch's characteristics and benefits. However, in general, a typist would prefer tactile feedback, but some typists also prefer the auditory sounds of the clicky switch. So whether it's just a personal preference or they actually need the auditory feedback from the clicks. So in general, you can choose in between clicky and tactile switches. Number 1, clicky switch for typing. Clicky switch is famous for being the loudest, but at the same time the auditory feedback can also be useful for typists. Clicky switches do offer the tactile bump feeling when you press a key to the middle of its travel point, and you get a loud click sound when it's fully pressed. So you both get the physical sensation and audio cue that you touched and actuated a key. So it's important to understand the actuation point that actually registers a keystroke is near the lower travel point of the switch, so you won't accidentally push a clicky switch when you slide your hand across the keyboard. Number 2, tactile switch for typing. There are 2 reasons for choosing tactile switch over clicky ones. You don't like the clicking noise, or you don't want to use more force or push in your keys like how a clicky switch would require. Most tactile switches would require less pressure to actuate a key and is far more silent. Some good tactile switches hardly produce any sound when you use it, and this might be a good choice out of respect for those around you. Due to less pressure required and the lower actuation point than a clicky switch, a tactile switch is also much versatile. For an instance, you can use it for activities that require rapid typing speed like gaming. Which key switch is best for a gamer? First, you should know the important factors to consider when considering a key switch for gaming. There are 2 things that really matter in a gaming keyboard. The one is the switch shouldn't need too much force to actuate. And 2, the switch should register as early as possible. With that said, there are 2 types of switches you can consider, the linear switch and the tactile switch. If you want to maximize speed, then a fully linear switch can significantly improve actuation speed so you can take more rapid actions. On the other hand, if you're okay with sacrificing a little of the actuation speed in exchange for tactile feedback, then a tactile switch might be a better fit. How to remove and change a keyboard switch. Here are steps on the simplest ways to remove and change keyboard switches by yourself. Remove all keycaps at the back of the keyboard. Remove the keyboard pads from the front panel. Desolder the key or keys carefully. Be careful not to overheat and damage the circuit board. Unbent any pins. Use the tip of the soldering iron carefully. Remove the hot glue that holds the key in the plastic matrix. And then pop out the old key switches. Now you've removed the old switches, you can clean the parts with water and a mild soap. Here is how you can put in the new switches. Important, make sure the key switch is set properly in the plastic matrix before you solder it to the PCB. Solder in the diodes. Check the original switches if necessary for the correct orientation. Hot glue them in place. Position the flexible PCB over the back of the switches properly. Re-bend the pins to hold it in place. Solder everything, then reassemble the keyboard. Test the switches before you put the keycaps back on. How to clean and lubricate a keyboard switch. Cleaning the switch. Remove the keycap. Hold down the stem of the affected switch. Drip the cleaning solution. With a dry cloth, rub the switch clean. Use compressed air to blow out excess liquid, then let it air dry completely, and then reinstall the keycap. Lubricating the switch. Removing the keycap. Wipe old grease from the stabilizer bar and also inside the keyboard. Apply silicone grease in the middle of the stabilizer bar. Apply the grease along the inside of the back clips of the keyboard, and then reinstall the keycap. In conclusion, while there are many different brands and types available for mechanical keyboard switches, they can be boiled down to just 3 types: linear, tactile, and clicky. After watching this guide, you should have better insights in mechanical switches, and hopefully you'll be able to choose the right one according to your needs and preferences. Check out Keyboard Kings. For more guides and reviews, go to my website keyboardkings.com. And the link to this article will be in the description box below.